number one is client retention. That lets me know that I'm problem solving and not just being transactional. I want to make sure I aim to have like 100% client retention. I don't want to lose a single customer because I work so hard up front to gain that customer, and I'm so intentional with my prospecting. I want to make sure that I don't lose a single one, and it helps me know that I'm problem solving. The second one is my profit margins, but it probably isn't like the reasons that most people think. Like, I'm not actually trying to maximize my profits. I'm just trying to maximize the sustainability of my brokerage.
Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers and afraid. We are proudly presented by SPI Logistics, and we've got another banger of an episode for y'all today because we have Krystina Booker. She is the founder and CEO of Booker Transport Solutions out of Tennessee. And after 10 years in the industry, Krystina decided to launch her own brokerage back in 2024 and set clear non-negotiables and still cross seven figures in year one, all during a freight recession. So we're going to get into the playbook of how to qualify shippers without racing to the bottom, build a carrier bench that you can trust, and use tech where it helps, all without losing the human touch. So Krystina, I've been wanting to have this conversation for a while, so thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Now, I was listening to a couple of interviews that you had done previously, and I loved the mantra of slow, meaningful, thoughtful prospecting, especially from the sales perspective. And I'm curious, with your early brokerage career, how important was it to have that mindset going into starting your first brokerage? Because anybody who's worked inside of a brokerage floor knows that it just feels like chaos all of the time. And it feels like you're just running down, 1,700 cold calls in a day and mass emails. And it's a lot. And from the perception I get from your LinkedIn posts and from your interviews is that you take a rather opposite approach. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think, when you're first on the floor of a big box brokerage like I was, they look at metrics quite a bit. So the metrics are, make as many calls as you can, send as many emails as you can, get as many replies, try to turn those replies into freight. My only thing was I need to get actual freight on the board. I need to turn that freight into profit. I don't need to jump in on a bunch of distribution lists. I need it to be meaningful. I need to generate actual revenue that's profitable, but also is based in a relational sense and not just transactional. So, with that, the way that I like to go about it is if I'm going to do that, my prospecting needs to be intentional. And so I do my research. I like to always think of myself as like the opposite of what, a pod leader would want to hire as a new account manager or whatnot. Like, they would hate me because I don't sit there and make 50 calls a day or send a ton of emails. I do more research than I make calls. But the calls that I do make, I find to turn into actual conversations that then lead to something eventually. So yeah, it's been helpful in the way that I approach my prospecting because it comes from a very relational sense, and I think that the prospects sense that, and I think that my customers know that as well.
And so take me back to the moment you decided, or did maybe you are all always knew that you wanted to start your own brokerage, but what was I guess, the catalyst that made you say, okay, it's time to do it now?
Well, I don't think it was more of like a leap or it was time to do it now than it was like a evolution or a transition. I've been in this industry since college, really. So that's like 10 years. I graduated college in 2016. I've been in this industry since then. So I think it was just when I was looking for that next step. I'm in Freight Alley, I'm in Chattanooga. And so when I was looking for companies that, I felt like could align with my values, and I don't want to I don't want to say anything out of line here, but I just didn't feel like I wanted to continue on with the big box world. I wanted to jump into my own thing. I wanted to try it. And I knew that if it wasn't going to work, then I could pivot and continue down the road that I was on, which is kind of in that big box world, or maybe go down the agent route. But yeah, I felt like I needed to go ahead and try it. I had enough experience and had enough knowledge. And I did have to start from scratch when it came to my book of business, but I felt confident that I could do it even in a freight recession. That wasn't really like a variable that I paid that much attention to.
So when you what does, I guess, sort of day one look like whenever you're opening up the office? Are you getting the paperwork in order? You're getting your insurance, all of the, I guess, the operating authorities and all of that, I guess, government type stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one thing at a time. So you start your MC, that's first thing first, and then you get your insurance together. Of course, you have to have your bond. And I'm not sure if people know or not, but the contingent cargo insurance is not actually required by FMCSA for a freight broker. But based on my customers' requirements and their preferences, I went ahead and got mine. But if there's so much information online, so if anybody ever wanted to start their own MC, their own freight brokerage, it's actually fairly easy. And I'm sure that that the barrier to entry is very minimal. So yeah, I think that even if somebody is not from the industry, as that there are a lot of people who are not that are starting their own MCs. So somebody who knows the ropes, knows the game, it was fairly easy. But day one, I mean, there's a lot of day ones. Day one looked like starting my MC. Then there was another day where it was getting my insurance. There was another day, putting a list together of prospects, and another day of putting a list together of carriers who I thought would be a good fit. And so, yeah, it was just putting one foot in front of the other.
It's like that old saying, how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. And so
Exactly.
tackling
That's
these little
exactly how
things.
it was.
Now,
Mhm.
I am curious about sort of the research process, because you say you're very intentional behind it. So what are you how does that process work? Because I've always wondered, from the marketing side of things, when I worked in house at a brokerage, I felt like trying to get that kind of information out of the sales reps was like pulling teeth. But they were working in a very different environment where they were working off of the massive distribution list, Zoom info and just mass emailing everyone. But from the intentional approach, did you pick like a certain niche that you wanted? Like some people pick like the aerospace niche. Is there, a certain commodity that you're going after? Like, how do you, I guess, intentionally try to research prospects?
Yeah, so I am a domestic freight broker, full truckload and less than truckload. I'm not a drayage broker. I don't do anything in Canada or Mexico, just domestic. And that is a huge variety of freight, right? So that gives me a lot of opportunity. With that being said, I primarily prospect on LinkedIn. That is a lot of where my inbound and my outbound leads come in from. So what that typically can look like is if I use Sales Navigator, for instance, I know who my current customer list is right now, who I deal with on a daily basis. So that looks like, a distribution manager, a logistics manager, a regional logistics manager, right? So I already know this. I will look for that type of persona in LinkedIn, and I find people who fit that, right? Then I reach out to them and I let them know that I've already worked with somebody like them. I already solve problems that they may have. And then I kind of lead with what I'm doing now, the problems I'm solving now, and seeing if that's something that they may need help with, right? I think a lot of prospecting is timing. And a lot of timing, you just have to be there to let them know who you are. I think a lot of brokers, the mistake that they make is just throwing themselves at the prospect is like, hey, this is what I do. My company is great, but they not so much want to know what that your company is great. They want to know that you're great because you're going to be the one that's handling their freight. Like, what does your experience look like, right? So I kind of lead in with that.
So you bring up I love the process side of things because I'm always trying to figure out, okay, well, what could I have done better in my previous role as far as like, from a one person marketing team perspective, but then also from a current perspective of what can I share with other like freight marketers that would really help them out in their job to help them help their company or help their sales team. So I'm curious as to like what I guess maybe it sounds like you're kind of doing all of the marketing and sales. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah, I am the only person doing the marketing and sales.
And so
Yes.
I would imagine that LinkedIn is probably your bread and butter.
Yeah. Yep. That as far as rebuilding my book of business, that
Mm.
is where my especially my inbound leads have come in from.
And then what
Now, I will say like 30% of it have been from referrals
hmm,
or, friends, talking to their family members or whatnot, and especially referrals from my past customers. But then the other half of it is just people having conversations and stuff like that.
that's you are the second broker that I have talked to that have talked or maybe even the third that have spoken about just the value of referrals and then also in person, like just showing up to an office and shaking someone's hand
Oh, I will
can
do that. That's all I did when I
a
first
li-
started my brokerage. I just drove around. I literally like got in my car and I spent like a week just driving around. I went to like Dalton, Georgia, Rome, Georgia, like Cleveland, Tennessee, and just showed up and shook everybody's hand and just had conversations. Left my cards in like random mailboxes. I don't know. I'm crazy. I'll just show up. I have like no sense of, you know, until you tell me like, please, like, F off. We don't need. That's the worst in my mind. Like, that's the worst thing that could happen. So I really don't care.
well, I mean, it's clearly worked for you because you've built a successful
Oh,
business
yeah,
during a
absolutely.
recession. So,
Yeah.
with your approach to shippers, you mentioned earlier about how you started building your relationships with shippers and you started building your carrier base. Are you using sort of the same approaches with carriers versus shippers?
Hmm, no, not necessarily. I mean, I won't go and like visit a shipper or a carrier unless we're doing a ton of business
Hmm.
together. I won't prospect carriers the same way I do shippers. Um, but I do I vet my shippers like I do my
Hmm.
carriers. I want to make sure that I get paid so that my carriers get paid, right? I feel like a lot of brokers miss the mark when they get so excited that a shipper is promising them revenue that they kind of look the other way when there are red flags. I won't do that. So when it comes to vetting, I look at both things. If I'm going to vet my carriers rigorously, I'm going to do the same for my shippers. But prospecting, no, I don't. But I also like my with this book of business, it's a lot of it's like urgent and project freight, where my last book of business was a lot of food and beverage, so it was a lot of contract freight. It's not like that this time around.
And so when you are, building out and making these connections and trying to build these relationships, what are maybe some red flags of like a shipper is not right for you? Because that was one of the posts that I really resonated with when yeah, I think it was a while back that you had posted on LinkedIn about how you'll tell a shipper no, that I'm not a good fit. So I'm
Yeah,
curious as to what that looks like. And I'm imagine that probably develops even more trust even though you're not going to work with that shipper, but it still maybe signals a high trust factor. What are some of those red flags that you look out for that you're like, this isn't a good fit for me?
I think it all starts with asking the right questions. One of the questions I like to ask shippers is, what did your previous relationship look like with your broker? What do your relationships look like with your carriers now? Right? And I think that tells you a lot about how they treated their brokers. You also want to just ask, I know it's uncomfortable to ask questions about money and getting paid, but it's important. You want to go ahead and lay all that out on the table so that you know. I made that mistake kind of early on, not in this, not with this brokerage, but in my previous one. And we ended up having to not to just quit with the credit because, we were like 100 loads in and it was a project just because they stopped paying. So it was just one of those things that like you have to have a list of questions in your mind when you start that conversation with a new shipper. And, they may not all be comfortable, they may not all feel natural, but it's just you're getting to know a new relationship, and you want to make sure it's a right fit. So just, don't be afraid.
And I think one of your unique selling angles is that you kind of from what I've heard in other interviews that you've done is that you're building more of a boutique style freight brokerage, where I think other brokerages are, the big box brokerages, as a lot of people will call them, three-letter brokerages that are out there. But you're taking more of a boutique approach. Why that approach versus just massive amounts of hiring and scaling and getting as quickly as possible to 100 million in revenue?
I just don't see the appeal in that. And that's
Mm,
kind of why I wanted to start my own thing anyway. I mean, I just don't see the appeal of always pleasing your board members,
mm,
always transaction first, or transactions first, profit first, everything else second. I I feel more connection with customer service first,
mm.
more connection with people first, I mean, in a world where profits over everything, like why can't we bring back people over everything, right? Like you should see some of these like high turnover rates and all these brokerages when it comes to their employees, but the deeper stories, it's the same with their customers.
Mm.
You know, you think that a customer is going to want to stay when their favorite broker was just fired? Absolutely not. So their turnover rate for their customers is just as high.
Hmm.
And
And
I
so
just
from
don't see the appeal in that. I feel like that's going backwards. Like why have 200 customers that you're constantly turning over and you're having to hire and rehire new brokers that know nothing about the industry, that constantly put freight at risk, that constantly put drivers on the road that are not vetted because the broker themselves is not experienced. So then they hire a carrier that's not experienced, and that carrier has a driver that's not experienced, and then it just creates a domino effect. So I'm thinking like if I have a business that's more intentional, I mean, I haven't had a single customer that has left me. And I mean, I think that's purposeful, right? And that's meaningful, and I that means the world to me, right? So, and I think that's how I just want to continue my business.
Yeah, because I think that that's a good thing to kind of pull that. I want to pull that thread thread a little bit,
I'd be at work.
string thread and
Yeah.
whatever it works. It's after Labor Day holiday weekend,
Yes.
so trying
You're
to
not
keep my
wearing
verbiage
white, so
right.
you're okay. Your words
So
are jumbled, but it's fine.
yeah. So as a business owner myself, I have seen the temptation or maybe have, felt a little bit like, oh, should I be trying to build a huge business? Should I be trying to hire a bunch of different people? And I always just had this kind of inkling of no, that's, when I start hiring, then I'm responsible for those employees and making sure then my business goals change a little where it's, less. I guess you could probably still focus strongly on the customer if you also have employees as well, but you have to be good at both operations and people management when you start hiring versus just being really good at customer service and operations. And so I've intentionally kept my team very lean, you know, eh, we can all play multiple roles if needed. So I really connect with your business approach of how you're approaching like the brokerage market and building it out very intentionally and is sort of the way you see fit. And I imagine that for a lot of your customers and carriers, they'll follow you wherever you go versus a big brokerage brand. Have you kind of experienced that as you're rebuilding, that you have developed this sort of fierce loyalty with shippers and carriers that they want to work with you no matter what?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, that's where the referrals come in at.
Mm,
I mean, that's kind of what's helped me rebuild my book of business the second time around is that referrals. And that came from my mentality, um, and having that boutique level service where I want to keep it small because I want to keep it intentional.
And so with the last, I guess, handful of years, we've just seen such a dramatic influx of technology coming onto the scene where, it's AI, it's agents, it's, all of these different tools and technology, visibility and tracking and all of that stuff. How do you decide what to invest in? Because, I mean, as a single operator, then it's one of those things where like you only have so much time in the day. So how do you vet new tools that you should be having into your tech stack? So I guess maybe give us a high level overview of what your tech stack looks like and then maybe how you consider adding to that tech stack.
I mean, the first question always is this something that is going to help my customers? Is this something that's going to help my carriers? When it comes to my customers, carrier vetting is the most important, right? I'm not going to put, you know, unreliable, unvetted carriers on their freight. So I use tools for that. I have organizational tools, but that's just my OCD preference. So I'll use like Front, versus the Outlook platform. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. For marketing, I'll use like Canva. That'll
Oh,
help
that's
me
perfect.
put like my posts together. I don't use much AI. I try not to, but I'll use it to like help me brainstorm. But as far as like writing and stuff, I don't find it very helpful, so I don't use it all that much.
Yeah, I think that's sort of a lot of the pilot approaches for a lot of different AI agents. Like I think that just based on my own personal experience, the agent side of things they're really good at one specific thing. But you better hope that none of the other like data integrations into those things like have a flare up because then that's going to mess up and then it's going to have a trickle down effect on some of the content and numbers that you're looking at. So you have to be like overly cautious but also enthusiastic, I think, to use these tools. Because I think for a lot of folks, they use it once, it messes up, and then they never go back to it. So I was just curious as to how you kind of vet new technology into what your operating system looks like. But it sounds like you come from it from a very like first principles approach of is this going to help my carriers or is this going to help my shippers?
Yep. And if it doesn't, then I just find it wasteful. So yeah, I mean, I think marketing is important. I obviously first things first is carrier vetting. That's the most important. FMCSA, they don't do a good job, so you have to use other platforms to just kind of understand FMCSA a bit better and what you're trying to decipher as far as the carriers MCs. But then as marketing wise, I do outsource website and SEO and all of that.
Yeah, as you should, as a
Mhm.
website operator, yes, as
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
should. I have a vested interest in people outsourcing that to me, so I will co-sign that all day.
Yeah, and I just did it through Intex. I did my website through Intex, and I don't know if you've heard of them. They're like I don't know where they're located, but they did a pretty good job, and it was just like a one-time thing, and yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, most websites, you really only have
'Cause
to.
I tried to build my own website. I did it the first time, and then I went through like a brand identity crisis where I woke up one day and I was like, "This brand doesn't define me." So I spent like an entire day trying to figure out what I wanted my logo to be and how I wanted it to look, and it's just a nightmare. I'm not good at all that. I'm very, like, operational, but I am not very creative. I say that, but I love to, like, paint. I don't know. But as far as, like, design, no, no. But yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the I think as a business owner, sometimes we just overcomplicate it and then we kind of maybe and I'm speaking from personal experience, like I get in my own head and I look at my some of my own sites, not even client sites, but I look at my own and I'm like, this is a disaster. I have to redo it all and doing
Yeah.
it on like a whim.
I've
And
done that several times.
it's like we don't need to this probably shouldn't be the focus of today, but you
Yeah.
kind of have to battle, I think, those types of business improvements of what to invest in, and then what to purposely avoid, or put on the back burner, for the time being. I am curious as to, as you're, so we've talked about starting the business and, building up your book of business. What are a couple metrics that you follow from, like just a business perspective, that helps you know that your business is on target, hopefully increasing revenue or increasing margins? What are some of those metrics that you look at on a regular basis for your brokerage?
I mean, I would say number one is client retention.
Mm,
That lets me know that I'm problem solving and not just being transactional. I want to make sure I aim to have like 100% client retention. I don't want to lose a single customer because I work so hard up front to gain that customer, and I'm so intentional with my prospecting. I want to make sure that I don't lose a single one, and it helps me know that I'm problem solving. The second one is my profit margins, but it probably isn't like the reasons that most people think. Like, I'm not actually trying to maximize my profits. I'm just trying to maximize the sustainability of my brokerage, right? I'm trying to make sure that I have enough buffer to pay for the carrier vetting tools, to provide the value that I need. And that also tells me that my customers are finding the value, from what I'm offering, and that I am building partnerships and not just involving myself into rate wars
mm.
and price wars. That's what I'm trying to avoid at all costs. But it's tempting in this industry because there's so much of it. So that's probably why I write so much content about it, because if you're prospecting, you'll run into that a lot. Like, sure, I'll add you to my distribution list. And so, yeah.
What is your approach when it comes to LinkedIn? How do these, because these posts that you're creating like do very well numbers wise. It feels like, a lot of people resonate with them. I'm not even a freight broker, but I enjoy reading them. So what
Thank
does, I
you.
guess, sort of your process look like? Are you writing once, a week, or, you kind of got a few ideas, banked and then ready to go? What does I guess the LinkedIn process look like for you?
Honestly, I'll be on a walk or a run, and just something will pop in my mind. And I love this industry. I love logistics. And so I'm constantly thinking about it. A lot of, sometimes I'll think about all the mistakes I've made, all the advice that I wish I had when I first started. So I think a lot of my inspiration comes from that too. But yeah, it's just kind of random. I don't really have a process. I wish I had a better answer for you.
No, I mean, I
I
think
know.
that well, they always say, go if you're frustrated at work, like go take a walk. And it's the
Yep.
most clarity that you can gain is just by maybe making your brain not focus on a million different emails and phone calls and loads and all of those things. Just taking a break can allow your brain that boredom to come up
Mhm.
with
I used to
creativeness.
listen to music and, used to read my emails or scroll or whatnot, and then I was like, "No, I need to be out in nature," and that's when, a lot of a lot of my inspiration comes from, honestly, and I was like, "I need to do this more often."
Yeah, for sure. I definitely echo that because it's either the walking, the beach, or taking a shower. Those are the only times really that I've tried to have no
It
tech.
quiets
It's
your mind.
right. But that's where the ideas flow is in those moments. So I from your lens of working in some of the big box brokerages and then starting your own, and obviously this is a very like male dominated industry where a lot of that, I guess a lot more women are starting to come into this industry. So I'm curious as to maybe what are some advantages of being, a woman in this industry? We always hear, about the downsides of being a woman in this industry. But I think you come at it from a different lens of like there's some positives that you can kind of lean into with being a woman in this industry.
I mean, that alone makes you a little bit more unique,
Mhm.
I'm not like a Chad with a sweater vest, so that alone makes me a little bit different, right? Um,
Probably less aggressive too with, give me your business or else.
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I just come at it from a calm, collective standpoint. I don't try to make it a point to say, hey, I'm a woman in the industry, so therefore you should give me your business because I'm a woman in the industry. No, I'm great at what I do. In fact, I'm the best at what I do. You should give me your business because you will find value in what I do, and not because I'm a woman. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I guess that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, because I
That's
think
just like a side effect.
yeah, it's almost like being a woman in the industry can get your foot in the door, but your solutions and your service are the ones that are going to keep you there. Okay, so what does obviously we're in a very challenging market. You've chosen, or not chosen, but you've proved that you can build a business in a freight recession. So I'm curious as to how are you kind of mapping out what the holiday season looks like, what maybe early 2026 looks like? Are you just kind of plugging along like business as usual?
I mean, I'm constantly available for my customers. So to me, it doesn't matter if it's a holiday season or a Sunday or a Friday night. I mean, I make it a point to be available 24/7. And that's just kind of how I run my business. I always have done it that way. It's one of my value points. So yeah. I mean, I just, like I said earlier on the podcast, just put one foot in front of the other, and my customers keep coming back. So yeah.
So no real concerns about like a huge slowdown, because I think that that's where a lot of folks are worried right now. Is there's a lot of things going on, unpredictability, tariffs, kind of trade wars, all that stuff. But it sounds like if you just focus on your customers, then you can kind of you know pay attention, stay informed about what's going on, because that's part of the job. But then on the flip side, only can focusing on what you can control.
Yeah, and I also think, if I was heavily niched down, I think I would be in a different mindset, but because I'm, a domestic over the road full truckload and less than truckload freight broker,
Hmm.
I mean, I've got plenty of opportunities. So I've always had the ability, I mean, since day one, if freight volumes go down for a couple of my customers, I will go out and I will regenerate some
Hmm.
volume. So no, I'm not worried. I'm constantly yeah, a lot of brokers that stay busy that already have the volume. I don't think that they think enough ahead. I don't think that they prospect enough because they feel so confident that that volume will stick around. But
Hmm.
I always try to get prospecting in.
Hmm.
I've always been like that, and it's paid off.
So never
I mean, even
settle.
if I get, 5 outreaches a day, so
So it's
it's
working.
helped. I'm still here, so.
Yeah. So for folks who may be thinking about, starting up their own brokerage, getting started in the industry, what advice would you give them, to start making those preparations now in order to start successfully?
Um I mean, if you're going to start in the industry, I would honestly get your foot in the door with a W-2
Hmm.
big box brokerage. I would be careful signing a non-compete or a non-solicit. Non-solicits are okay as long as you don't plan on stealing business or whatnot, unless you want to get in a lawsuit. But be careful with non-competes. Watch the contracts. Make sure that you're not signing anything that is gonna, put you in a position you don't want to be in. So that's my advice. But if you want to learn everything that you can, work with somebody that's been in the industry for a long time. And the way to do that is to be in an environment that has that. And that you typically will find that in brokerages, probably in your local town. I mean, every city has a brokerage or two.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that advice too, because if you can get that fundamental knowledge first, and then if you follow some of the sort of the same prospecting strategies that you've given out during this episode, of you can still find those similar customers, not the same ones, because you don't want to do a non-solicit, or you don't want to get in trouble because of you're soliciting those same customers. But then you at least have the basics covered, and then you can choose whether you're going to go out on your own, or you maybe do an agent model, or you can kind of choose your battle if you are to start out on your own, or start your own entrepreneurial journey, and then you can be intentional about that prospecting and taking care of your customers.
And then I will say that if you want to start your own brokerage, I would go and become an agent
Hmm.
first. I know I didn't do that, but my you know, I feel like everybody's life is different.
Hmm.
One path does not necessarily mean that you need to follow that. You have to look at your own variables, your own life, and do that as well. There's a lot like if you're on LinkedIn and you want to take that next step and you're at a W-2, right? And you're looking for that next step, not it may not be the wisest choice to just drop everything and drop your health insurance if you have a family and go and start your own brokerage. You kind of have to look at what's going on in your life. So yeah, I would also heavily consider that.
Yeah, because
Not to deter anybody from their entrepreneurial journey, because I'm all about that. I did it, but yeah, I definitely would, do as much research. I'm very cautious. I mean, I probably did like a year's worth of research.
oh wow.
I planned very, very heavily. So yeah.
No, that's great advice because from no, I think for a lot of folks, they make the decision quickly to go out on their own, and then they just jump into it, and then they have no idea where their next check is going to
Yeah,
come
it can
from.
backfire very quickly and it can backfire very painfully.
Yeah, and at least with, something like an agent model, especially if you have, a book of business that's going to follow you, some of those, the costs, the liability, the insurance, a lot of those things, just from talking to a lot of like the SPI agents that I've interviewed on the show, having that safety net
Mhm.
helped them be able to sell better and prospect better because they
Absolutely.
weren't worried about, making insurance payments, which is, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars for like
Yep.
liability and, all of that. So all of those costs you still have to, sort of keep in mind too. Not sort of, definitely keep in
Yeah.
mind too.
I mean, before I started my own brokerage, I was in every role with my previous W-2. I
Hmm.
did the, cradle to grave brokerage. And then for 2 years, I just strictly did sales.
Hmm.
So, it definitely helped when I was starting my own brokerage. And then I did operations and then I led an entire team. So it's like I had so much experience that when I was ready, I was definitely seasoned to start my own brokerage. But I feel like there are a lot of people that do start their own thing, but just don't have the experience to back it up. And then they are in it for a year and it's appealing at first, and then they run out of money.
Yeah.
And then that's it. Right. And then they're out of the industry. So if you want to stick around in the industry, have as much experience under your belt as you possibly can. And you can get that from so many companies, and definitely look at all of your options. There's so many options out there.
Now, in our pre-show document that I have each guest, fill out, I ask them, what's a few philosophies that you strongly believe in. And so a couple of them that you listed here is women don't have to choose between success and family. We can build both, which I think we were talking before recording, you're mom of a little girl, she just started school. How are you balancing the everything with being a mom, which is a full-time job, and then obviously a full-time brokerage operation? How are you balancing those 2?
I mean, I have my people, you know, um, I'm blessed in that sense. But no, I definitely believe that we are in a society where a lot of the times the people in our lives try to make us choose,
Mhm.
especially our employers. They will try to make us choose. Do you want a promotion? Well, in a way, you need to check off all the boxes here at work. And that part of that means that you can't necessarily start a family and be away from work, right? But my thing is you can build both. I mean, there's so much going on with remote work right now, and I'm a big advocate for it. I think if you want to build both, that is such a core component. There's no way I could have done it without being able to work from home. There's no way. Trying to balance Natalie, which is my daughter, and then growing my career at my W-2. It was impossible. I
Mm.
was constantly taking steps back because I had to be like, hey, I have to work from home. And then I was always getting pushback, for that. And then wasting time having meetings for why I was working from home. It was just BS. So I was like, you know what? I don't need to waste 20 minutes driving into work. I could be prospecting within that 20 minutes. I could get up. Now I wake up like at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'll prospect. I'll check on my loads. I'll do what I need to do. I'll take care of my daughter when she wakes up. And I also strategize with the people around me. I vocalize that, hey, I want to grow a family. That's important to me. And I want to have another child. I want to be a homemaker. I love that. But I also want to have a career. And so if you love me, you'll help me achieve both. And luckily, the people around me have agreed to help me do both. But I think a lot of women are afraid to vocalize that. I do. I think that a lot of women they try to sit in their box and they try to smile and appease the people around them more than they try to appease themselves.
Yeah, because it's an unfortunate sort of reality that, for a lot of women, once you reach like a stable, what it feels like a stable part of your career, it's also like the prime, like, baby making time. And it's one of those things where you feel like you have to choose. And once you get to a certain point in your career, it's like, well, can I do both? I've been told for years that I got to be able to pick one or the other. And I think stories like yours and stories of other, working women who have the flexibility of being able to work from home can do both, because it's so much more, it fits the lifestyle so much more of being a great mom and being a great business owner if you can have that flexibility of working remote. So I mean, I'm an advocate for working remote, especially to offering those kinds of solutions
Mhm.
to your all employees, really, to be able to have that time home that's so important, and then also be able to build on your career. Otherwise, a lot of these companies need to just start having, in office daycares if you want your employees strapped to the desk the whole
Exactly.
time.
Exactly. No, it doesn't make any sense. And I also, I'm a big advocate for like not being afraid to take a step back from your career.
Mm.
If platforms like LinkedIn exist so that you can stay relevant without actually having to go 120% at all times, right? And I've kind of learned that. Like, the very first year of my business, I was like going 1,000%, trying to balance it all. And then over the last, I'd say 6 months or so, especially around May, I was like, I'm going to create content. Still, I'm going to be involved in the industry and talk to people and continue to run freight and continue to take care of my customers, but I'm going to lean in more on the family side a little bit. And then there will come a time where I'm going to lean more onto the business side, right? So it's balance is not so much as being split at all times between the two. It's leaning more one way or the other. But LinkedIn helps a ton because you can still stay relevant and create content without, being present at all
Yeah.
times.
And I think too, it's LinkedIn allows you the opportunity to have a keynote a keynote to your audience speech every single day or multiple times a day if you wanted to take that posting route where, back in the day it might have been you have to be able to have an opportunity to speak or be on a panel and go to a conference in order to put a face to a name. Nowadays, you can go digitally and you can go to a massive audience, and you can do it multiple times per day. So I definitely
Yeah.
hear that statement as well.
Yeah, and I think it's less about likes and all of that as much as it is just getting in front of people and letting them know your thoughts, right? Like I don't just post for the sake of posting. All my posts are pretty long-winded. I'm sure a lot of people probably don't read them, but
No,
they're
but a lot of
intentional.
people do, and I'm one of them. That's a whole reason. Your LinkedIn posting is a big reason why I've been wanting to have you on the show for so long, is because you can tell that you're coming from a place of, deep experience, and a lot of people talk about, being authentic and organic, but you're actually out here, doing that and telling both sides of the coin, not just, the good victories, but also, some of the challenges and the defeats, and saying no when it doesn't make sense for you, your
Yeah,
business, your
absolutely.
family. And I think that's the ultimate freedom. So it's It was great to finally have this conversation. And as we kind of round it out, is there anything important that you feel is that you want to mention that we haven't already talked about?
I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Just don't be afraid to say no.
Hmm.
Don't just know that the moment that you're in does not define you. Okay. As a freight broker, as a salesperson, if you just heard a no, if you're failing that week, it doesn't define you. Just keep going, put one foot in front of the other, learn as much as you can, stay humble. I'm still learning every day, and I've been at this for like 10 years. So that's the biggest thing is just know that your growth is the only thing that defines you, not who you are in that moment.
Yeah, well said. Where can folks follow you, follow more of your work? If you're a shipper listening, you want to get in contact with Krystina, where can folks find you?
You can just go on my website or my LinkedIn. It's bookerfreight.com or my LinkedIn. It's Krystina Booker. Mhm.
Perfect. We'll add all of that to the show notes. And Krystina, it was awesome finally getting you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks.